I recently read an article talking about a story recently happened in France. This story tells us something about the way we tend to think and the way we tend to react automatically to some situations. So that's why it's worth unpacking. Basically, the editor, which is a very small editor in France, published this book in a very limited amount of copies, no more than a few thousands. An official from the Ministry of Equal Opportunity found the title to be offensive and sexist. I will read you next what he said about it. This book is obviously an ode to misandry, which is hatred of men. I would like to remind you that incitement to hatred on the basis of sex is a criminal offense. Consequently, I ask you to immediately remove this book from your catalogue under penalty of criminal prosecution. So apparently the most relevant thing about this news, though, is that the official from the ministry hasn't actually read the book. So his opinion is formed exclusively on the title and decided to publicly make a case about it without making sure that it was relevant to the content of the book. So here is what the editor said about these complaints. This book is not incitement to hatred. The title is provocative, but the intent is moderate. It's an invitation not to feel obliged to hang out with men. In no way the author incites to violence. If we consider that the ministry official hasn't actually read the book, as far as we know, the comment from the editor seems quite reasonable. But even here, we have no actual information about what is the content about. Just imagine some editors from 1920s writing about the Mein Kampf, something like, "This book is not incitement to hatred. The title is provocative, but the intent is moderate. It's an invitation not to feel obliged to hang out with Jews. In no way the author incites to violence." Of course, I assume, even without it reading, that there is no comparison whatsoever between Mein Kampf and this book. But it's just to make sure we understand that reading only the title or reading somebody else's comments is not enough to have an opinion about what we're talking about, because we actually don't know what we're talking about. By the way, in case you are wondering, yes, I tried to read the Mein Kampf, but other than being incredibly aggressive and violent, it's also very boring. So, I admit not reading it all, but just some parts. So, having said that, without reading the book and the content, the reasonable thing to do is to just wait for the judgment. We can make a couple of comments about the events. So, first of all, the ministry official seems very naive. He exposed himself publicly without reading the content about an issue around which there is a lot of sensitivity on every side. So it seems quite unreasonable to make a strong assertion without knowing what you're actually talking about, and you risk to make a fool of yourself. As regards the title, it seems objectively quite questionable. If it was, instead of the word men, any other referral to ethnicities, or not to speak about a man writing a book titled "The Women, I Hate Them," and it would become easily and very fast an international scandal. You can have your opinion about that, of course, but that said, the intent was clearly to be controversial and to be provocative. And they also stated that, of course, afterwards. Point being, it really seems that they were hoping for some officials to fall for it and get angry and make a case out of nowhere. Something that nobody would have actually noticed because it was very small and they would have only made a few thousand copies that maybe they wouldn't have even able to sold. Now it became an international case, and that thanks to this official being quite naive, as I was saying. So we cannot really judge the book on the cover, as people say, and in this case from the title, because it was clearly designed to create a reaction, and you have to see what's written inside the book. So, having said that, without reading the book, the only opinion that we can have about it is, I don't know. Having said that, we can get some information reading an extract that they published. The accusation of misandry is a silence mechanism, a way of silencing the sometimes violent but always legitimate anger of oppressed people against their oppressors. Resenting misandry, accusing it of being a form of sexism, like any other, and equally condemnable, saying that sexism is not always condemned, means sweeping under the carpet with bad intentions the mechanisms that make sexist oppression a systemic phenomenon in history, in culture, and in the relationship with the authorities. Now, this extract is probably insufficient to have an opinion about the book and to really get what's inside it. But, I mean, to be honest, anyone can have their opinion, but it seems that there is some form of misandry inside it. Anyhow, it's also worth remembering that in spite of being considered a monolithic movement, feminism is not at all monolithic. There are many different opinions inside the feminist movements, and there are many feminists that would not agree at all with what is written in this extract. So in the end, there are a couple of reflections that I want to share. First of all, it's one of more of a personal nature, personal opinion, which is on one side there obviously is a gender inequality problem, which is less than it used to be, but it still exists. And my point of view on this is that it's an actual problem and it's important to deal with it, but I'm not sure that approaching it as a war between genders is the best way to actually solve it. And that's it. I know that somebody will agree, somebody else will disagree, and that's fine. But I think that it's in any case worth discussing it, and that's the reason why I'm talking about it. The second one is just, damn it, don't stop at the title or at somebody else's opinions or comments. If you want to have a definitive opinion, go and read the sources and understand what you're talking about. Otherwise, you may end up having an opinion that is not your actual opinion. It's not the opinion you would have if you knew how the facts went or what a book is about or whatever, if you don't get to the source. And other than that, even only not to make a fool of yourself, it's worth knowing what you're talking about. Or not to fall into a trap like the provocative title and making a big deal something that wouldn't have been, like the case of the official. So, I mean, know what you're talking about. Learning to understand how we actually make our opinions is very useful, and it's a big part of our life in general. And we act out accordingly to what we think and what are our opinions on things. So that's the reason why I like to talk about this topic as well, even though it's a bit different from my usual kind of content, more focused on mental health. And so from time to time I will share also these kind of videos. If you like this content or any others that I did in the channel, you can subscribe to it, and I hope I will see you in next video. Thank you.